Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and I'm here with Aquila Mendez-Valdez. Hi, Aquila.
Hi, Angela. How are you?
I am doing so good. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to talk to you because we're talking about PR and marketing, which I think is really important, especially for small businesses. Aquila is the founder and CEO of Haute in Texas, an award-winning PR and marketing agency based in San Antonio. She's been asked to speak and present to audiences across the US, Europe, and Asia, and has been featured in Forbes, Newsweek, the Telegraph UK, Digiday, and PR on the Go, in addition to numerous appearances, publications, and podcasts for her expertise in both the PR and marketing worlds. Fantastic. Very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So first question, what made you want to get into PR and marketing?
That's a wonderful question. So I really, from a young age, I loved reading, I loved writing, I loved stories. Anything kind of in that realm was always one of my favorite things. And I grew up on a farm in Indiana, so you can imagine there was not a lot going on besides just my imagination and being able to tuck away with a good book. I'm the oldest of six, so if I could find a quiet corner by some miracle, I was all about it. But from that point, I initially in high school and kind of early college thought I wanted to be a journalist. And then like many of, potential journalists or people who do go into the journalism field started to realize that maybe the work-life balance would be a little bit tricky in that field. And so when I switched to PR, I felt like, okay, I've found something where I can still do that piece that I love of being curious and telling stories, but also get to, do things in a way that would make sense for having a family and having my own business. And that was really kind of the best of both worlds for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that life balance, especially as a mom and working mom and trying to get it all together, finding that balance is tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I know I was fortunate that I made that switch early enough that now I've been able to do my entire career in PR and marketing, but I know it's not always the case. Sometimes you have a little bit more of a roundabout way of finding what you love. So I was just really lucky in that regard.
Oh, that's awesome. What I love about PR and marketing and what you talk about a lot in your bio, is storytelling. And I think that that's such a key piece. So can you talk about how storytelling is important for PR and marketing?
Yeah. Right. Well, I think it's, really what kind of differentiates us from just, simple advertising or running an ad, something where it feels a little bit more disconnected from your audience. I think PR and marketing, especially in the age of AI, when it's really easy to just whip up a image or a copy or something like that, stories are really what actual humans connect to. And so I think that really gives you an opportunity to build a campaign that's going to resonate with people, that's going to actually move them towards action and what you want them to do, and just feel more, I think, truly loyal to your brand if they understand the story behind the founder or why you're launching this particular product or why you decided to, move the company in a certain direction. When you let people kind of have that insight into the story behind it, they feel like they're along for the journey, and that just deepens their, brand loyalty to a whole other level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that one of the powerful things about storytelling is it lets people imagine their place in your story. And
Hmm.
I think when you can do that, you really connect, and that requires some vulnerability and it requires some transparency, which can be a
Yeah.
little bit scary for people, but you want
Yeah.
to be the one to tell your story and not let somebody else be the one to tell your story, because
Yeah.
if you can control the narrative, you're in a much better position.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And to your point, even if you're feeling a bit shy about sharing your own story, if you can tell the journey of your customer really well and make sure that they understand, I know what you're going through, I know how you feel, I get your pain points down to a T. Again, you're going to connect with them and have them feel so much more, I guess, willing and able to support you because it feels like you actually get them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of briefly touched on this, but AI is becoming a massive thing, right? And a lot
Yeah.
of small businesses are leading on the AI component. Or
Yeah.
is the PR marketing, are you guys embracing it, or are you kind of trying to separate yourself from it?
Yeah, I was just talking to my team about this and sharing some articles about it, earlier this week because especially I think on the PR side, you're seeing kind of one of two camps. You're seeing some journalists that are embracing it and excited and using it to sort of aggregate, information really quickly. But then you're also seeing publications opt out of being part of the AI search engines and they don't want to be included, in those references. So that divide, I think, will just kind of continue to widen. And it's really affecting, I think, on our side, if we're crafting content that we're pitching to a journalist, we have to be very, very careful how much we use AI, how much is actually, truly original content coming from us or from our client directly, to make sure that that relationship with that journalist doesn't get completely, tattered and ruined because we send them something and it's 100% AI generated and then
Yeah.
they're never gonna, be able to run that. So I think it's definitely sped up some of our processes, changed a lot of the ways that we do, in particular like research and, maybe just in that ideation phase, we can kind of get that brainstorming session going a little bit faster with the help of AI. But at the end of the day, I think there's still a lot of areas where marketing and PR need a human touch and, it's still that human direction of what's the creative spark that gets AI to do what it does best.
Yeah, and I think there's value in AI, but I also think that there's no substitute for, like you were saying, that human element. And,
Yeah.
while it can do a great job of giving you like a template or something to kind of work on, like sometimes if I'm writing something, I'll use AI just to kind of spur some ideas, but
hmm
then I just kind of run with it from there.
Yeah, yeah. I think the most interesting area that, like I said, we were talking about earlier this week is really in terms of search and, how do you make sure that your content is the content that these, AI chat options pull for a resource? If you want to be seen as an expert, if you want to be the thought leader, how do you make sure that your content is AI friendly so that yep, you're the first person that, Chat GPT thinks of when they're pulling the references for a particular topic. So even down to like the SEO side and things like that, I think how much AI is going to shift search engines and overall kind of how we gather information is something to be thinking about if you're in charge of making sure that your brand is front and center and in everybody's mind.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So when you're looking at running an ad campaign, how do you kind of position a business? Like what do you do to start ideating, to start creating that like story and that vision? What are
Yeah.
what are steps one, two, three? Like if I'm a small business and I've never hired a PR firm, how do I prepare for that?
Yeah. So when we're onboarding a client, we usually go through a pretty extensive, brand audit and make sure like we have a messaging framework that we go through and work with them on to make sure, what are your key differentiators? How do people work with you? What's the best way for them to reach out? What are the key messaging points that you want to hit on, consistently over and over and over again? Because we want to make sure they understand like if we're putting out content that starts to feel redundant to you, that means that we're just barely getting across the message to your audience. Like we've got to say things five, six, seven times before it's going to sink in. So how can we do that in a way that is actually hitting the mark for what your goals are? And then I think, when you get down to the actual like content creation side, once we know your messaging and we know your framework, now how do we make that content actually exciting to watch and actually
Mm.
engaging? So we talk, I probably push my team with feedback on content about hooks on, a daily basis. Like what's the visual hook for this piece of content? What's the verbal hook? What's the caption hook? How are we hooking people? How are we making sure that no matter what, they want to stay and give us an extra 2 seconds or 3 seconds of their time? Because it's not enough to just put a video out there for the sake of a video. It has to actually be optimized and strategically thought out as far as what will actually stop the scroll.
Absolutely. So you're saying 4 to 5 times is what somebody has to kind of see an image in order to I've heard that before. I've heard it's something like 3 to 5 times.
Yeah, image or a campaign or, a new product launch. We've had people come to us before and they're like, well, I already told people that I do this and nobody, responded, nobody raised their hand. And we're like,
Mm.
okay, well, how long was your campaign? And they're like, well, no, I just did like one Instagram post. And we're like, oh, okay, there's our biggest problem. Like we've got to say this, until you're absolutely sick of it for people to be able to understand, hey, we've got like on a personal level, I'll give you an example. We just launched in December a new campaign to do content clinics, basically like social media kind of done with you, where we would have small groups come into our offices and work with us on their social media strategy. And I launched it in December. I pushed it for 7 days and it was like crickets. And in my head, I
Really?
was like, okay, this is a really big learning moment for me that number one, I chose a terrible time to try to like catch everybody's attention when it was like middle of holidays, like everybody's just their minds are totally different places. But then number two, like to not let it completely discourage me and to say, okay, we're going to take that, we're going to learn from it. We're going to relaunch it in January and put it right back out there and say it again for 7 days because it may have very well been that we just missed people's attention spans. We just didn't catch them or we didn't say it often enough. And I think it's okay to be able to admit when something, truly doesn't work. But a lot of times it's just a matter of your customers are out there, you're just not reaching them, either correctly or messaging it. There's all sorts of different pieces that we can now kind of A/B test and see if we can hit the mark a little bit better here in January.
Absolutely. And that makes so much sense because I've done that too. Like, I try to not launch podcasts during the holidays because it's like the lowest rating. It's like
Yeah.
you're not getting the eyeballs. People are distracted. They're out shopping, they're cooking, they're
Mhm.
spending time with family, and this is
Yeah.
the last thing on their mind. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's very valid. But you're right. So, I mean, sometimes even though we're in the industry, we're the experts, we sometimes like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really nice wake up call of like, oh, you're not immune to that. You've got to
Right.
also pay attention to those things.
Right.
I wish, or maybe not wish, that's probably too strong of a word, but I would love for more people to understand that just because your marketing agency, might propose something and if it doesn't work perfectly, it's not a reason to say like, well, they can't cut it. They're not, worth their salt. It's really more so, I think, are you watching what that agency does afterwards? And do they use that as an opportunity to say, no problem, this is how we're going to make it better and bigger for, 2.0 launch or 2.0 version? Or do they just kind of continue to keep staying stuck in that cycle of like banging your head against a wall kind of thing?
That makes so much sense.
Mhm.
So, do you find on the PR side, are you, because I've heard so many times that like I have friends who are in media and they used to say, well, we have all these media directors and these guys have been in the industry for years and years and years and it's like this high prestigious job and you work your whole career to get up to this news director, media director like level. But now they're starting to kind of get rid of those folks and put in the clickbait people, the
Mhm.
20 somethings who, they just know how to make sensational headlines. Do you see that to be true?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So I think that, a big thing, particularly when you're a product-based company, you have to understand the name of the game in that PR world is really those affiliate links. Like they
Mhm.
are absolutely not going to include you in that article if there's not a chance for that media company to earn some ad revenue or affiliate revenue from that link.
Oh, interesting.
So making sure that you understand that game and being able to sort of insert yourself into seasonal campaigns where journalists are going to be looking for, I'm not going to put a product up there that I don't think is actually going to sell. And they, for better or for worse, it's causing them to change what type of selections they're going to make. It's not always just about the small business that they really love this particular soap that they put out or whatever it is. It's what company is already set up on these platforms for me to drive affiliate revenue. And I'm going to go with them because my boss is going to ask me, okay, how did that article convert? Did we drive any revenue from that? So that's just sort of the unfortunate, landscape for media right now, that ad revenue is dropping. They've got to figure out how to make money somewhere. And a lot of, even on the, non-product side, on, articles or content that's a little bit more, editorial in nature, a lot of that is even going to pay to play.
Yeah.
So when you do have an opportunity to, connect with a journalist that's actually writing a really great, earned piece of content for you, I think the biggest, advice I can give is to take advantage of that to the fullest, because it's becoming more and more rare, unfortunately.
It really is. And since you kind of briefly touched on it, can you describe to the audience what earned media versus paid media is?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's definitely, I think, a little bit of a jargony kind of term. So
Yeah.
earned media means that we've got a journalist who is writing about you for free, that they're not charging for that space in that media publication or on that show, or, whatever the media outlet is. Earned media is that, your agency or whoever it is has reached out to that journalist. They've said, yes, I want to talk to them. And they're writing that piece in a very non-biased way. When you're talking about more paid media, then you're, handing over a chunk of change for that piece of media to be written. And it gives you a little bit more editorial control to say,
Hmm.
these are the photos I want. This is the language I want. Maybe you can actually write the piece and it's more of like a editorial kind of op-ed almost piece of content. But again, it's going to have that exchange of money, and it's going to typically come with some type of disclosure, so that, the audience understands, like, this is a paid sponsor. And that changes things a little bit, I think, in terms of the potency of that piece of content, when the audience is savvy enough to understand, like, okay, well, they paid to be featured on this.
Right.
That changes the dynamic. So that's where, earned media really has kind of that, gold standard, particularly with, driving an audience to feel that level of trust is sort of kicked up a notch in that department.
Yeah, I would definitely imagine that trust is a big factor in that because, if I see somebody's been featured because of how, they've solved a problem for somebody, that really
Mhm.
resonates with me versus this is how great we are, this is how amazing we
Mhm.
are. And,
Yeah,
you can kind of tell when it says, paid sponsorship or something, you
right.
give it a little bit less validity, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. No, 100%. I think that, earned media can feel scary for a brand to give over that control to a journalist, but
Yeah.
we have to always kind of guide the client to understand that even if it doesn't feel 100% self-promotional and here's how to call us, give us a, click here, do this, that's actually a good thing. That's actually going
Yeah.
to be, even though it's a softer sell, it's a little bit more of a, like, truly valuable way to connect with your audience, because they're going to be evaluating you without feeling like they're being sold to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really does. And, I see that all the time. So, do you feel like there's value in, going in and paying for those media spots? Do you, because I get these all the time, somebody's like, "Oh, we have the top 10 business women of the year, why don't you, it's $5,000 to be one of them." And you're like, is
Yep.
anyone reading that and taking it seriously? So, I mean,
Yeah.
what are your opinions on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the difference between, is it fast fashion or is it luxury? Like, are we willing to
Okay.
take the time to actually wait for a true feature in Forbes? Or are we going to jump on an advertorial where they're going to put your name in the Forbes, but they're buying ad space and they're just putting you, in there as an additional person who's paid the 5,000 or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
So it gives you that, fast fashion, quick, oh yeah, I can put, the Forbes logo on my website now. I've been featured in Forbes.
Right.
But it's going to have, a quick, moment with your audience, but it's not going to necessarily introduce you to a whole host of like new eyeballs. So you just have to sort of understand like what your actual goals are. Are you launching something? Are you getting ready to fundraise? Are you getting ready to do something where, hey, I need to see concrete 10, exact number of pieces in the media over the next 30 days? All right, well, if you really want that fast, that quick of a turnaround, you might have to pay. Versus, no, I'm in this for the long game. I really want to make sure that any coverage is actually true, earned media. They're doing a full, deep dive on us, and it has that, actual credibility behind it. Then you've got to be willing to give it a little bit more time and be patient to see those results coming in.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Mhm.
So when you're out there doing a campaign for someone, do you feel like it's a good idea to do kind of a mix of, media like PR and advertising, or do you really kind of go down one path?
So I always come back, when some of our clients are interested in more traditional advertising, like a billboard or radio ad or buying ad space in a magazine. I
Hmm.
always want to make sure I understand like their true budget, their true like high number, for their marketing overall. Because in my mind, unfortunately, I think that traditional advertising is probably going to have the least rate of conversion. It's great if you've got the dollars. It's great if you're, a Fortune 500 company and you've got allocated your, millions to every single bucket. But if you're a small business, then in my mind, traditional advertising is not where I would be putting my dollars. And I love my friends that are in magazine,
Yeah.
publishing, and they're, doing all of these wonderful things for their clients. But at the end of the day, if I have a small business owner who's really watching their dollars and cents, I want to put them in front of people that are actually ready to make a decision, or much further along in the customer journey. And to me, billboards or things like that is going to get you a ton of eyeballs, but maybe a tiny fraction of them are actually going to be ready to make a purchase.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to go where your audience is, right? So
Mhm.
I see all the time people who have billboards up there and I'm like, why would that need to be a billboard? Like
Yeah.
people are just not, rolling down the street looking for, whatever the service is, accounting, something
Right.
crazy. I'm like, why?
Right.
Like what's
Yeah.
the point of the billboard? Like a billboard to me is like a quick jolt of like, hey, this is a brand, this is a brand, this is a brand. Or
Yeah.
hey, we've got Bucky's coming up in the next,
Yeah.
exit, and they'll have 14 billboards
Yeah.
all in a row,
Right.
right? So you
100%.
can't
Yeah.
miss it. But I feel like all the advertising, you have to go where your customers are, right? Like it's
Mhm.
not going to help Bucky's to put it in a print ad, right? Because you're like,
Right.
it's like 50 miles from me. But if you're 20 miles away from the exit, they have them all the way down the highway. So
Yep.
it makes
Yeah.
sense. So go where your customers are going to see you. Um,
Mhm.
so one other question is print dead?
Yeah. I think it depends on who your audience is.
Mhm.
It's interesting that, we've seen some consumer brands go back to sending out like mailers and actual like magazines, or, like your old school kind of catalogs. Like it's almost this like novel, experience for your customers to feel like, oh my gosh, they sent me an actual like catalog. This is
Uh-huh.
amazing. So in some ways, I think that print will always kind of have this like nostalgia or this like feeling of, the brands that I am the most loyal to, I would love to get mail from. I would love to feel like I open my, mailbox and I've got a cool surprise from, a retailer or something like that. But at the same time, I think that, you've got a younger audience coming up that, I just spoke a couple weeks ago to a group of high school girls, and I was asking, if you're a fashion brand, what's a magazine or what's a media outlet? I think I said media outlet. I said, what's a media outlet you would want to be featured in? And, you ask somebody my age that, and instantly I could say, Vogue or InStyle or Glamour, or, I'm thinking magazines, and they all start naming more influencer brands and like
Yeah.
brands, like individual people that they were thinking of, like if that clothing brand worked with that person, yes, I would be excited about it. But it was so fascinating to me that they did not think of a traditional media outlet at all. I had like, I think maybe one of the mentors, like who was my age, raised her hand and was like, Vogue. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Right, right. That's interesting. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
You
because
know,
I
it's
would I
not
would go the exact same way. I'd be like, I want to be in Entrepreneur magazine. I want to be in Forbes. I want to be in
right.
Vogue. But
Right.
yeah, that's so
Yeah.
fascinating.
And for a certain age demographic, absolutely, print still carries weight. It's still a really cool, feather in your cap to be able to say, like, we've been featured here, 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 and here. But you have to understand, who your audience is. Do they care about it? If not, then it's not worth your time.
Well, and I have found, and I was featured in both Entrepreneur and Inc., which was a huge, huge like milestone. Like I was like, I've made it, right? And so like that was like because I've spent 20 years learning from these magazines. But when
Hmm.
it came time for the magazine to come out, I couldn't freaking find them. Like I couldn't find them anywhere. And so it's
Yes.
like, I would get my like my subscription, but like I want to go buy a copy for my mom. I want to go buy a copy for my office. And so
Yeah.
but you can't find them. Like I feel
Yeah.
like when I go into like a grocery store or Target, it's all these like super specialty magazines, like
Hmm.
knitting,
Yeah.
which you
Yeah.
cannot
Or
find.
hyper local. Yeah.
Yeah. But like finding
Absolutely.
these like, traditional magazines that we grew up with, you just can't find them anymore. And
Right.
so you have to go to a bookstore or you have to order them online but like
Hmm.
finding them is the challenge.
Yeah, yeah, same thing. I've experienced exactly the same thing. I was featured one time in the print publication of Newsweek, and I
Hmm.
had to go to some random third-party site to order a copy, and it took 2 weeks to come in. And by the time it came, it was the wrong issue I had ordered. And I was like, oh my God, forget it. I think I was in there. I don't know. I don't have to
Yeah.
see it. But it was just so funny that like they've made it, so niche. But to your point, some of those local community, publications, where you find it in the local grocery store or people can pick it up. We have had some clients be featured, oh, the new store's opening, and oh, I really follow. Like here in San Antonio, we have one called Community Impact.
Hmm.
And we've actually seen an uptick of customers who say, oh, I follow you in Community Impact, and I saw your,
Interesting.
store opening. So sometimes you will find kind of that older demographic that feels really, really proud to support small businesses, that they will follow those hyper local publications. Um, but maybe it's not a print publication. Maybe it's your hyper local, email newsletter. Like we have a couple here in San Antonio again, like SITX Today, and we have Axios that is here, and their email subscriber list is wonderful engagement and
Mhm.
hyper targeted audience. So don't discount those type of publications where it's not a flashy name, it's not Forbes, it's not Inc., it's not Entrepreneur, but there's power in that audience too.
Absolutely. And, if you're trying to build a base, where better than your own backyard? So, yeah, I
Yep.
think that that's a really smart idea.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
I'm one who still reads the newspaper. Like I get the Business Chronicle and I still like to flip through it. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I get to the back of it and I'm like, I did something. Versus, they send me the exact same content in their newsletter, but I don't read the newsletter because if I read the newsletter, then I'm only reading like one or two articles. Whereas if I get the actual magazine, the actual newspaper, then I'm flipping through and I read the entire thing cover to cover. And
Hmm.
so, I feel like I've accomplished something versus like, oh, I'll check out a few words of this and a few words of that. And it's not the
Right.
same dedication to the news.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different experience for sure. I think that there's, something to be said for like something physical in people's hands.
Hmm.
Same thing with our local, San Antonio Biz Journal. There's an audience that feels very excited to see your name in that particular
Yeah,
publication. And again, if they're an audience that's looking for what you do and they see you in a type of publication that they feel is, credible and valuable and hyper local, they're much more of a warm lead than just a billboard, buzzing on by.
100%. And I see people that I know in like a Business Chronicle, and I'll immediately text them or email them, "Hey, just read this great article about you." And they're like, "You're the one?" Like,
Yeah.
but it's like, no, these are, but like if I like what I've been featured in them a couple times, and I get more texts and emails from that than I ever
Yeah.
did with Ink and Entrepreneur because people are picking it up and reading it, a lot of the
Right.
local people. So so
Yeah, yeah. And
fascinating.
how powerful for you to be, top of mind for them now. That exact moment they might not say, "Hey, I've got a lead or a referral for you," but
Hmm.
if they do in, the next 30, 60, 90 days, you would think they're going to mention like, oh, you've got to call Angela. Like she was just
Right.
featured in this and she's a big deal and she's killing it right now and da 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 da. Like it's just adding to that conversation and keeping you top of mind with people that know you and love you and want to know how they can support you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing that's more heartwarming as an entrepreneur than having people reach out and say, how can I help or how can I support you? Because
Oh,
that really means a lot. And referrals, like we live and breathe referrals because,
hmm.
it's expensive.
Yeah.
So you
Yep.
want that to go far. But
Yes.
so
Yeah.
speaking of marketing, as a small business, what advice would you give in someone like a small business wanting to develop their very first marketing strategy?
Yeah. I would say, a super deep dive on understanding who you are and
Hmm.
who your customer is and what their pain point is before you even publish, that first post. And then giving that, concept, whatever it is that you come up with, giving it enough time to actually see if it works before you decide to pivot. We've worked with small businesses before where it seems like every week they're changing their, product or their
Yeah.
offering or their, something about their system is changing. And it's like, okay, if we're having a hard time keeping up, imagine how your customer is feeling right now. Like what do they do? How can I support them? Is it going to be open 9 to 5 or 8 to 6? Or like what is the best way to connect with them? So I think, having that patience in mind that it's going to take time. And, when you decide, okay, this is our customer, this is their pain point, taking the feedback from that audience to eventually be able to tweak and understand, like, where did we miss the mark or where can we continue to kind of hone in will just help you to continue to get better and better. But that research component is not to be skipped over. It really is so critical to lay that foundation first and then feel like, okay, we're ready to actually move forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really important. Um, so, who one of the questions I ask all the time is who inspires you?
Ooh, I love that question. I would say, my dad was an entrepreneur. He still is an entrepreneur, and my mom helped, with the family business as well. Grew up on a family farm, and so I've given actually a couple different like talks and presentations on the lessons that I learned from having a dad who was a farmer and definitely a very very unique way to grow up, but. I think that the inspiration that I took from them and that I continue to, call them and ask for advice on is, that feeling of we can figure it out. I think there's
Hmm.
so many women that are in corporate jobs or more traditional kind of 9 to 5s where they just feel like the unknowns of entrepreneurship are scary enough that they decide like I'm just not gonna there's no way. I couldn't figure out health insurance. I couldn't figure out taxes. I couldn't figure out like all the back office stuff feels so intimidating, but seeing my parents go through it really made me feel because I am not naturally a super, adventurous, spontaneous, let's just go with the flow kind of person.
Right.
But the fact that I saw their example and I knew no, we can do this. Like
Yeah.
there's options, there's alternatives, there's, a life outside of just the corporate 9 to 5. I that made me so much more confident to make that move. So always taking inspiration from them. My mentor, Jenny Dietrich, is another huge inspiration. She's the creator of the peso model.
Mhm.
And we have been working with them as part of larger sort of mentorship group over the past year. And Jenny, I think, has such a wonderful framework for people like me that feel like, okay, if I am going to continue to work with these, small businesses, large businesses, like any type of client, I've got to be able to show our worth and our ROI. And the peso model and the way that she's broken it out does such a good job of actually making that actionable and easy to follow and just a very I think innovative approach for the PR and marketing and really integrated communications in general. And I'm so glad that I've had the chance to learn from her because as soon as you decide like, I kind of know it all, I'm good, I don't need to, continue learning, you're dead in the water. So
Yeah,
I'm so grateful to
100%.
her for
Yeah.
that.
Well, and I think that has definitely come about over the past several years as I've learned about your celebrities versus influencers, right? So you were saying
Mm,
like if you think you know it all, you don't. Like I thought, we've always grown up with celebrities being the people that you idolize, and now that's not true. Like
yeah.
I feel like we're in a movement where it's like a very anti-celebrity movement where people are
Yes,
almost
excuse
like,
me.
oh my gosh, why do you have Beyonce on there? Nobody cares what she thinks, right?
Yeah.
Versus an influencer who has so much more power and status than celebrities these days. Like I've
Hmm.
just noticed it seems like, and I could be wrong, this is just my perspective, but it feels like there's an anti-celebrity movement happening where people, and I think a lot of it is the Diddy thing and just feeling like celebrities have these like hidden lives and they're not as true.
Right.
They don't resonate
Right.
because, they're these multi-millionaire, billionaire people and they don't have anything in common with us. Whereas influencers feel like they're one of us. They feel
Hmm.
like they're just a normal person who happens to have a platform and it doesn't feel so isolated from, the celebrity culture, which I think
Yeah.
people are becoming disenfranchised with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been a tough couple of years. I think
Mm,
there's a lot of people struggling. There's a lot of people who feel uncertain of what the future holds. And
right.
to your point, have been obsessed with Wicked since it just came out. And they talk about, in that movie, what caused people to start turning against this certain demographic. And it was, well, there was the drought and things were tough. And so they look for somebody to blame. And I think exactly what you're talking about, that when things are tough, celebrities feel totally tone deaf. They don't
Yeah.
feel like, oh, she knows my struggle. She knows what it's like. Whereas influencers do. And that's truly, and, I just saw an article the other day too of influencers who were trying to post detox, like affiliate links for products after the LA fires.
Oh, wow.
So there's your like, mega influencer saying, "Oh, I think I've reached a status where I can hawk this product and I can make sure that my audience knows they can do this and this and this." And immediate backlash from their audience of like, "What are
Wow.
you doing? Like people have lost their homes, they've lost everything, and here you are, making a quick buck off of a detox drink." So it won't take much for people to turn on influencers either, but
Hmm.
the ones that are smart and savvy enough to understand the power lies in your authenticity, I think will be the ones that actually, go the furthest.
Very, very interesting. Yeah. So it's fascinating because I grew up where, if you put Michael Jordan on anything, you're going to sell millions of dollars of it.
Right. Yeah.
But that was what I grew up with. And now, that's death sentence. It's like you must really be struggling if you have to use a celebrity to endorse your product, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I don't know that they convert as well as people think they convert,
No.
like we've had clients that, were a jewelry brand and had a really famous, actress share it on her stories. And we thought, oh, let's brace ourselves. It's going to sell like crazy, blah, blah, blah. And it was just nothing,
Wow.
nothing coming through. And I think, to your point, I would much rather, see somebody share a relatable Amazon haul of like, no, this is like a cute necklace, but it's not a necklace. Like that's just wonderful, aspirational, and wonderful for people to see. Like she has great style. But
Right.
do I feel like I can afford what she affords? No, probably not. So yeah, it's really, again, going back to what we talked about in the very beginning, just making sure that you're telling the story and you're connecting and you're resonating with your actual audience.
Absolutely. So, to kind of pivot back to some of the questions that we always ask on every podcast, as women, we often give our power away in some way or another. Is there a time that you've
Mm.
given your power away and maybe another time that you've stepped into your power?
Ooh. Boy, I mean, I have certainly had, former clients where, you're the only woman in the room and
Yeah.
it's very easy to feel like, oh, I've got to kind of make myself smaller. Like it's a
Hmm.
very scary place to raise your voice and feel like, if you disagree, that you're welcome to share those types of opinions. So absolutely, I can think of, some moments like that. But I would say, over the last 2 to 3 years, I think especially as I get closer to turning 40, they always say like you run out of F's to give by the time
Yep.
you turn 40.
It's
So
so true.
I'm getting I'm getting there. Like mine might
Hmm.
hit earlier because I have, businesses and kids and all the things like pushing me. I'm running out of F's at a much faster rate than the normal person maybe.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, there's been a few, times over the years where I have, been terrified to speak up for myself, but every time that I do, it is so validating and reassuring that you made the right call, you did the right thing. Your gut and your intuition is one of your superpowers as a woman, I think. So, learning to actually trust that and not let the voice in your head kind of talk you out of it, is when the real kind of magic starts.
Aquila, I can't even tell you that statement because there's been recent times and I mean I should know better, but there's been recent
Hmm.
times where I'm like, I knew something wasn't right. I knew it wasn't right, but I talked myself out of it. I talked myself out of believing the intuition, believing that feeling. And you're right, it is our superpower, and we are so quick to ignore it. Like, I'm
Hmm.
just being paranoid. Nah,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's just I shouldn't think that way. I shouldn't automatically be suspicious. But
Yeah.
when you know. And yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, just so many recent times where I'm just kind of like, if I had just that little whisper in my head, maybe
Yeah.
slow down, maybe stop, maybe pivot. And I just didn't
Hmm.
because I convinced myself that people had my best interest in mind or people were being
Hmm.
honest and you just know. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
But you're right. It is our superpower. We just need to learn how to harness it for good and stop
Hmm.
thinking it's meant to harm us in some way.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Oh boy, 18-year-old Aquila.
Uh-huh.
Um, boy, I think, I was a very, type A, walk the straight line, tell me what I'm supposed to do and I'll do it,
Yeah.
to the T kind of kid. And I warn my husband still, I'm like, I don't know if I've had my rebel phase yet. Like I've never really had like my, moment where I'm totally, bucking the system. So I wish in college maybe I would have lightened up a little bit. Like I was
Yeah.
just so heads down, focused, do the right thing, don't get too crazy. And I feel like there's an emotional intelligence component where, if you take advantage of the college years to build, super strong relationships and learn how to like connect with people and all of that, it can really, take you far in, the real world. Whereas I was so intellectual, like focused on, let me get the best grades possible, that then it
Yep.
was like when I stepped into my adult life, I had to kind of catch up in that regard.
Yeah.
So yeah, not to say that I wish I would have like, partied like crazy in college, but just had a little more fun. Just let
Yeah.
loosened up a little bit.
Yeah, I was probably on the exact same track as you. I need to get on the dean's list. I need to graduate with this honors, and I need to do this, and I need to do that. And then when I got out of college, and I'm in my early 20s, is when I made all the dumb mistakes. And I'm like, this is what I should have done in college when I had a bubble around me, because I always say like
Yes.
college is that perfect opportunity between adulthood and childhood where you're in a bubble and
Hmm.
you can't you're held responsible, but you're excused. You're given
Yes.
a lot more
Yes.
grace in
Yeah.
college. You can do dumb things in college and you're like, she's in college. Where you get to
Yes.
be an adult and, out of college. And even if you're like 23, they're like, you should know better. I'm like, but
Figure it out. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like how many times have I been asked for my college GPA over the years? Like never.
zero.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
really not as serious and as, extreme as what you think it is. So yeah, that would definitely be my advice for 18-year-old Aquila, but
Yeah, yeah, I can completely relate to that. So, this has been super fun and I've really enjoyed talking to you. I just have one more question for you. What do you
yeah.
wish more people knew?
Hmm. I wish more people knew truly, I think the biggest thing that has made a difference in my life is my love of reading and how much that impacted my ability to communicate and, write well, speak well, everything I think in terms of being a curious type person connects back to whatever field you go into. It doesn't have to be the PR and marketing field. But yeah, I was just talking to my best friend about that the other day, that I can't tell you how many times I go back and I think like, I am so glad that I just absorbed as much information as possible when I was really young, because I think that just sets you up for success in so many different areas.
It sure does. It helps you to think through things and know how to answer intelligently and come up with
Hmm.
great stories, and yeah, I agree. I think reading is really one of those things that we don't do enough of anymore. Short
Hmm.
attention spans, we click, 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 and then that's
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Yes, absolutely, Angela. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it as well.
Well, where can people find you?
Sure. So we are at hitpr.com if you want to check out our website. Or we are out in Texas across pretty much every social media channel. So that's HAUTEIN and then Texas spelled all the way out. But I'd love to connect if anybody, is listening and wants to, chat about PR, marketing, or share your, to be read list and let me know what I should be still absorbing as far as
Uh-huh.
information goes. I'd love to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And you can also find Aquila on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. And we will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time. And until then, step into your own power.